The title of our video today is BBC's Double Standard, and the gentleman that you see on your right, Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, and you're wondering why are we doing a sort of political video on a sports platform. You'll have to stick around to find that out, but it pertains to sport as well, and it pertains to, quite often here on Sports Today we talk about Team India, so it pertains to the overall Team India. Stick around, you're going to find out. As I said, the gentleman on your right needs no introduction. The one here, for those of you who don't follow a lot of football, let me tell you, his name is Gary Lineker, and arguably the greatest footballer to have played for England. I think, if I'm not mistaken, he's third on the list of most goals ever scored playing in that England jersey. My childhood memories are quite intertwined with his footballing journey. I remember watching him in that 1990 World Cup called Italia 90. At that time, he was the biggest star of the English team. Harry Kane, if you would like, would be a good example to equate him with if you are from the current generation. So why are we talking about BBC's double standards? Because you have a political connection and you have a sporting connection, but the story runs parallel, and that is what makes things interesting. So what has happened right now? Gary Lineker, after retiring, became a broadcaster, and he hosts BBC's Matchday show. That is the most popular football show, I could say, across the globe. He is the host of that. Recently, he has been fired from his position of being the host of that flagship football program that the BBC has, which has been running in for many years, has had many illustrious anchors and presenters and analysts being the part of it. Gary Lineker has been fired. And why? Because he made a political statement, and that is where I think the comparison will need to be drawn with how BBC reacted when it came to an Indian political issue and how they are reacting to an issue that is now related to their country back home. So what has happened? Now, before I give you all the details as to why Gary Lineker was fired, I'll have to take you back a bit, and this is a flashback, and this is where the Indian question comes in, because there was a documentary that the BBC made just a short while ago. The name of the documentary was India, the Modi Question. Now, this was a documentary, a two-part documentary that was pertaining around the life and times of India's current Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, and effectively the majority of this documentary was also about the riots that happened in Gujarat while Narendra Modi was the Chief Minister of the state. Now, that documentary, after the BBC released it, that documentary was banned in India. So the Indian government decided that that documentary should not be screened here. The argument that was made by the Indian government was that this is falsehood, that this is propaganda that the BBC is doing, and that this could cause some sort of unrest in the country if such a documentary is being allowed to screen. BBC on its part that time said that no, we stand by the content of the documentary. We believe in free and fair journalism. We also believe in freedom of speech, and they said you may not like the content of that documentary, but free speech allows everyone to express their point of view, and by which the Indian government should allow the documentary to be screened and let people then decide whether they want to believe it or not. So they hid behind the whole mask of freedom of speech. So that could have been a valid point. Now, there were 2 points or two sides to the coin. You had many people oppose it in India as well, digging history and saying how BBC on occasion has been a government mouthpiece and that they want to target India. So those that did not agree with BBC's point of view pointed these things out and said that yes, we cannot allow propaganda to be screened in India. Now, those people that opposed the Indian government's point of view said that, listen, this is curtailing freedom of speech. This is anarchy at play, and freedom of speech should allow every citizen to watch what is available in public platform and then make their mind on their own. So these are the people, and these are people in India as well, who had a different point of view. Now, I'm not going to get into which point of view is right or wrong. There will be merits and demerits of both the arguments, and for more detailed discussion on that subject, whether it was right for the government to put a ban on this documentary or not, you could look at our sister channels, whether it's AajTak, India Today. There are plenty of debates that happened on that issue. Plenty more people, more learned than me on the subject, who comment permitted that. So we'll allow you to look at that and then make up your mind whether that banning of the documentary was correct or not. However, what the problem right now is, and what problem we see, is that BBC then having double standards. So BBC says that that was a free and fair documentary that they produced, and that government should never interfere and let the media be free and express their point of view, or let the truth come out. And if the Indian government is not allowing them to do that, then that's curtailing the freedom of speech. So that was their stand at the time that they came up with that documentary. Now, what makes really things interesting is the fact they are now curtailing the freedom of speech of someone like a Gary Lineker. Now, Gary Lineker, who's working for the BBC, as I was telling you, he made a political statement, his own political opinion, whereby he says this is, and he's talking about the new asylum policy that the UK has come up with. So he says this is just an immeasurably cruel policy directed at the most vulnerable people in language that is not dissimilar to that used by Germany in the 1930s. So he's saying the language of the bill that has been passed or what the UK is contemplating is the same language that the Nazi Germany used to use in the 1930s. You know, they were very jingoistic at the time, the Nazi Germany, and they were based on that whole philosophy of race theory and all of that, and he feels similar things are happening right now. And then he further adds to a tweet that someone had tweeted to him. He replies to that, where people said that, listen, somebody must have argued that this asylum policy is good. We don't want people to come from outside and then just take asylum here, take away our jobs and stuff like that. To which he says, there is no huge influx. We take far fewer refugees than any other major European countries. He's talking about the UK. This is just an immeasurably cruel policy directed at the most vulnerable people in the language that is not dissimilar to that used by Germany in the 1930s. And am I out of order? That is what he's asking. So he's comparing the current policy to what the Nazi Germany would do during their time. So these are political statements that was directed at the current policy of the current government under Rishi Sunak. As soon as that happens, he is fired. Now people will argue that, listen, if you are talking about freedom of speech in India and you want the truth to come out, or if you have an opinion, you want that opinion to be expressed and then not be banned so that people can take an informed decision themselves, then what are you doing here? People will now also, no matter what you want, they will of course look at the connection between BBC also being government funded, and so now they're standing up for the government and firing someone who's expressing an opinion that is against the government. Just so that you know a bit of a background of what that asylum bill is, basically the UK government has now stopped small boats arriving as a top priority. A lot of asylum seekers come to the UK shores by boat. So now those arriving via this route face detention and deportation. Those removed will be banned from returning. So they can never come back if you are trying to come to the UK as an asylum seeker by boat. Now, why is this very controversial? Because the United Nations says asylum bill, which is the current UK asylum bill, is a clear breach of the 1951 Refugee Convention, which allows foreigners seeking refuge from persecution. So, someone who's been persecuted back home, or there is some war happening, or there are human rights issues, then those people should be allowed to go seek asylum. So it says it also gives them the right to not be sent back home. He's talking about, a breach of the 1951 Refugee Convention, which allows asylum seekers not to be sent back home into harm's way except under extreme circumstances. So if supposing the country that they're coming to seek asylum, that is going through, bad phase, or there is not enough food for people there. And these are things during the time of the World War, where a lot of countries were going through economic crisis. So saying under extreme circumstances, you can refuse these people from seeking asylum. But in the current state, where UK is a healthy, robust country, surely they're saying the people that are being persecuted could be allowed some space so that they can be away from a war tone country, and so on and so forth. So this is what the UN says. So this is why it is controversial. And then Gary Lineker came out and said his own opinion that, listen, people, you know, when they really need help, they're in a desperate situation, we should welcome them with open arms. Now, you may again have different opinions on that. You might say that, no, Gary Lineker is out of line. Some might say that, no, what Gary Lineker is saying is correct. Whatever your opinion, the fact of the matter is not about the nature of the opinion. What we're debating here is about free speech. So when you argue, as the BBC argues, that they're not allowed to express themselves and the freedom of speech is being curtailed in India, then aren't they doing exactly that? What the latest situation there is that people alongside Gary Lineker, Ian Wright, another noted footballer and a pundit right now, or Alan Shearer, all of them have come out in support of Gary Lineker and have told the BBC that if Gary Lineker is going to be fired from his job, then none of them also want to work for the BBC. So that's great that his colleagues have really stood up for him at the moment. But then again, as I said, it goes back to the BBC's double standard. Now remember, BBC is a 100-year-old institution. As I said, we're not taking side whether one documentary is right or wrong. We don't know whether it's propaganda or not, how much truth there is or not. But if you're arguing on the lines of freedom of speech, fair enough. I think there should be media freedom in whichever country, and you can argue in that, but you need to practice what you preach. If you like this video, do give us a thumbs up, and for more such content, don't forget to subscribe to Sports Today. Also, we'd love to know your opinion on this entire matter. So on the comment section, just give us a comment or two.